The air aboard the Kerev-class diplomatic vessel felt too clean to Oscar Hartley. Sterile, filtered, cold. It lacked that subtle chaos humans were used to: coffee stains, burnt toast smells, the hum of a vending machine you didn't trust but used anyway. He sat stiffly in the observation chamber, forearms resting on a table that was far too smooth, like it had been designed by someone who had never met friction. Opposite him sat Enar, a Xelvanti envoy, its skin an iridescent blue-green with elongated eyes that blinked sideways. Its movements were deliberate, quiet. Oscar tried not to stare at the vertical slits on either side of its neck, pulsing in rhythm like a second heartbeat. The alien was watching him, not with suspicion, but with the kind of measured curiosity that made Oscar feel like he was being dissected under a microscope. "You are trembling," Enar said. Oscar blinked. He looked down at his hands. They were, in fact, shaking slightly. He clenched them into fists and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Stress does that," he said. "Nothing serious." Enar tilted its head a few degrees, eyes narrowing. "Your physiology is not failing?" "No, not failing," Oscar muttered. "Just processing." Enar didn't respond immediately. It lowered its hands to the table, fingers webbed and translucent. "We do not tremble in stress. Our minds slow down. Our bodies still. You shake. You leak salt water from your eyes. You vocalize uncontrollably." "Interesting." Oscar grunted. "Yeah, we're a mess. But we get stuff done." Enar tapped its fingers against a screen embedded in the table. A holographic map of Earth's moon appeared, overlaid with colored zones. "You offered to accompany us to the lunar site," Enar said. "Given your current emotional state, are you still willing?" Oscar nodded. "You'll want a human perspective when you get there. And I've seen worse." Enar's gaze lingered on his hands. "You have seen worse." "Very well." The transit to the lunar site took less than an hour. The Kerev's internal gravity hummed inconsistently, just enough to make Oscar feel slightly nauseous. He didn't mention it. Instead, he kept his eyes on the view screen as the moonscape grew closer, endless gray, dotted with the remains of old probes and the freshly carved path of the alien excavation. The landing was smoother than any human shuttle Oscar had ever ridden. He stood slowly, adjusted his jacket, and followed Enar down to the surface. The air inside the tunnel dome was oxygenated for human support, but still had that artificial tang, like plastic and disinfectant. "Watch your step," Enar said. Oscar stepped over a cable and ducked under a low beam. The excavation site was a blend of Xelvanti tech and human scaffolding, hastily constructed when the aliens first requested Earth's cooperation. Somewhere beneath the surface, the Xelvanti had found something buried deep in the rock. They hadn't said what. A low tremor shook the ground. Oscar instinctively grabbed the railing. Enar didn't move. "That normal?" Oscar asked. "The structure is stabilizing itself." "You're digging into something that stabilizes itself?" Enar looked at him. "We are uncertain of the implications." They reached the lower chamber circular, with strange markings etched into the walls. Oscar stepped forward, boots crunching over lunar dust. "What is this?" he asked. "It predates our records," Enar said. "We believed ourselves to be the first to reach your system. This proves otherwise." Oscar crouched near one of the symbols, brushing away dust. His hands trembled again, worse now. He gritted his teeth. "You are shaking again," Enar said. "I know. Should I be concerned?" "No," Oscar said too quickly. I'm not used to being underground on the moon with an alien watching my every move." Enar was silent. Oscar turned back to the wall, trying to focus. "I need a reading on the depth of this tunnel. If this thing goes deeper," He didn't finish. A beam overhead groaned, then snapped. Enar reacted instantly, pushing Oscar aside. The metal slammed into the ground where he had been crouching. Dust exploded into the air. Oscar hit the ground hard. His right arm twisted under him at a bad angle. Pain flared white-hot through his shoulder. Enar moved to his side. "You are injured." Oscar didn't try to get up. "Yeah, pretty sure I dislocated something. Or worse." Enar activated a scanner. "Your humerus has fractured near the joint." You must remain still. No argument here. You must return to the ship for treatment. Oscar grunted. Fine. Help me up. Enar hesitated. You may lose consciousness from the pain. I said help me up. With care, Enar lifted him. Oscar clenched his jaw until his teeth ached, sweat breaking across his forehead. They moved slowly back through the tunnel. Every step rattled his arm. Back aboard the Kerev, Oscar was laid on a medical cot. The medtech's Xelvanti as well worked quickly, their tools humming with soft energy. One of them applied a stabilizing wrap and another injected a sedative. You will sleep now, one said. I don't want to, but the drug hit fast. His words blurred, thoughts spiraled, and he was out. He woke hours later, groggy and sore. His arm was immobilized in a firm brace. Enar stood nearby. You are awake. Yeah, Oscar mumbled. Feels like it's been hit with a truck. The fracture has been aligned. Healing will take 6 Earth weeks, assuming no complications. Oscar nodded slowly. Thanks. For earlier. You saved my life. You are our liaison. Your loss would be logistically inconvenient. Oscar cracked a weak smile. Right? Logistics. Enar stepped closer. You did not cry out, even in pain. Why? Oscar looked over, eyes bloodshot. Because I knew it wouldn't help. Screaming doesn't fix broken bones. Stress doesn't either. It just makes your hands shake. Enar studied him, expression unreadable. Remarkable. Oscar lay back, exhausted. You should see the rest of us. 2 days later, he was back on his feet barely. The medtechs had cleared him for light walking within the ship, and he used the time to review data from the excavation. Enar had suspended further digging until Earth's geological experts could examine the structure. That didn't stop other Xelvanti from theorizing. It is a vault, one said. Or a tomb. Or a warning, said another. Oscar listened but said little. His arm ached constantly, and he was tired of pretending it didn't. One evening, Enar joined him in the observation lounge, where Earth hung in the distance like a marble. You have resumed work despite injury, Enar said. Didn't have much else to do, Oscar replied. You could have remained in recovery. I'm not good at sitting still. Enar tilted its head. Your hands no longer tremble. Oscar looked down at them. Pain's still there. I'm just not afraid of it anymore. What changed? He thought for a moment. I guess almost getting crushed by a ceiling beam puts things into perspective. Enar was quiet. Then, you are unlike us. Yeah, Oscar said. We're used to chaos. You learn to keep moving, even if your body's a wreck. Enar nodded slowly. Then perhaps you are well suited for what lies beneath the surface. Oscar frowned. You planning to send me back down there? When you are healed, Enar said. Yes. Oscar leaned back in his chair, staring out at the stars. Then I better get used to the shaking. 3 days later, Oscar was pacing. The Kerev's infirmary had discharged him just before the second lunar cycle, his arms still in a rigid support brace. His gait stiff, his patience thinner than lunar atmosphere. He'd been told to rest, but the problem with that was he didn't know how to do it without losing his mind. No exercise, no field work, and no caffeine stronger than the nutrient broth the Xelvanti served at scheduled intervals. He missed coffee like a limb. He hovered outside the briefing chamber, where Enar was mid-discussion with 2 senior Xelvanti analysts. Through the transparent wall, their elongated forms shifted in slow, deliberate arcs, the conversation too muffled to decipher. Oscar leaned against the frame, tapping his good hand against his thigh until the chamber door slid open with a whisper. You have returned early, Enar observed without turning. Your recovery was not projected to reach this stage for another 30 Earth hours. I heal quick when I'm bored, Oscar said, stepping inside. And I have questions. One of the analysts pivoted toward him. This one's skin was darker, mottled with green flecks that shimmered faintly. It stared at Oscar's arm brace. The bone remains damaged, it said. Yeah, but I'm upright. That's progress. Enar gestured toward the table. Sit. You are disrupting the analysis. Good, Oscar said, dropping into a seat. Because I think you're all missing something important. Enar folded its fingers. Speak your hypothesis. Oscar reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim datapad, one of the few human devices permitted on the Kerev. He tapped through several images of the lunar chamber, then zoomed in on a section of the wall most had ignored. Right there, he said. That isn't just decorative. Those are pressure marks. Something pressed against the wall from inside. Enar leaned closer. We detected no breach signatures. Because it wasn't a break, Oscar said. It was a slow expansion. Like whatever was inside grew or moved, gradually displacing the rock. The stress lines don't radiate. They arc inwards. The darker Xelvanti narrowed its eyes. You believe the structure is organic. Not exactly. But I think it reacted to something. Maybe the excavation. Maybe us. Enar tapped the table, pulling up a holographic overlay. New lines appeared, tracing Oscar's pressure arcs. They matched. We will conduct seismic scans at higher resolution, Enar said. If your theory proves valid, the implications are significant. Oscar leaned back. I'm not here for the implications. I just don't want it collapsing on someone else. The analyst tilted its head. You risked further injury to deliver this? I risked my sanity trying to rest. This was the better option. Enar made a soft clicking sound, something Oscar had come to associate with contemplation. Then it turned to the analyst. Prepare a micro-drone survey. Full depth range. Include thermal fluctuation tracking. Oscar started to stand, but Enar raised a hand. Remain. There is a matter we have delayed. Oscar sat again, slower this time. Sounds ominous. The council has requested a psychological evaluation, Enar said. They are. Uncertain of your suitability. Oscar blinked. Because of the injury? Because of your response to it. The analyst added, you continued operations with impaired function. That is not logical. Oscar rubbed his temple. It's called grit. You push through so the job gets done. Even at risk of greater harm? Especially then. Enar stared at him. This is what confuses the council. Oscar sighed. Can I talk to them directly? They will not accept anecdotal justification. They require observable behavior. He frowned. So what? They want to watch me suffer again? No, Enar said. They wish to see how you adapt to ambiguity. Oscar narrowed his eyes. That's vague on purpose. Enar didn't deny it. The analyst stood and left without a word. The door sealed behind it. Oscar turned to Enar. You knew they'd make this request. They monitor all mission personnel. Your actions are difficult to model. Oscar looked down at his brace. Is this where I get quietly removed from the team? No, Enar said. This is where you are observed. The chamber went quiet. 2 hours later, Oscar stood in a cold, circular room near the ship's lower deck. No windows. No console. Just a standing platform and a dim pulse of light from the ceiling. Enar's voice came through the wall. You will remain here for an indeterminate period. No tasks. No stimuli. Only yourself. Oscar exhaled. You're locking me in a room to see if I go nuts? We are not interfering. We are observing. I hate this already. There was no reply. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. It was impossible to tell. The room didn't change. Oscar paced, then sat, then stood again. His arm began to throb from the weight of the brace. No chair. No water. No distraction. Eventually, he lay on the platform and stared up at nothing. Most people don't crack under pressure, he said aloud. They crack from the silence. No response. He closed his eyes. He thought about the moon, the pressure arcs, the way the dust had clung to his boots. He remembered the moment the beam gave way, the sound of metal breaking, the way time slowed. Fear doesn't shut us down, he muttered. It sharpens us. For a while, still silence. He drifted into a light sleep, not quite restful. When he woke, the light had dimmed. His stomach was hollow, his mouth dry. How long's it been? He asked. Nothing. He stood shakily, braced against the wall. You're probably watching my cortisol levels or something. Maybe waiting for my breathing to spike. He paced again. Then stopped. You think endurance is irrational. You think pain means stop. But sometimes pain means you're still alive. The wall didn't respond. Oscar walked to the center of the room and sat cross-legged. You want to know why we pushed through? Because most of us didn't have a choice. You think we're chaotic. But we adapt because we have to. The door slid open. Enar stood behind it, unreadable. You lasted longer than expected, it said. Oscar stood, slowly. Was that the test? No, Enar said. The test was whether you would attempt to escape. Oscar blinked. Seriously? You did not. I'm not an animal. That was the point. Oscar stepped out into the hallway, legs stiff. So what now? You will return to the lunar site. Your theory was correct. The structure moved. It has changed shape. Oscar frowned. How much? Enough to concern the council. They walked in silence for a stretch. Then Oscar asked, did they approve me? They did not disapprove you. Oscar gave a dry laugh. I'll take it. As they approached the docking ring, Oscar's steps quickened. Enar turned slightly. You fear what lies beneath the moon? Oscar didn't hesitate. Of course. Any sane person would. Yet you return. Oscar looked ahead. Because I need to know what it is. And because someone should go who knows what falling beams sound like. Enar said nothing more. The shuttle awaited them, quiet and sleek, its boarding lights blinking in slow rhythm. Oscar stepped aboard without hesitation. The air inside was a little too clean again. But he didn't notice this time. The descent shuttle vibrated subtly as it passed into the excavation dome's airlock. Oscar sat strapped into the seat nearest the viewport, watching the lunar dust swirl on artificial currents. Enar sat beside him, posture still and eyes half-lidded, as if it were already mapping the site's new layout in its head. I assume the structure didn't just politely unfold itself, Oscar said without looking away. It expanded downward, Enar replied. A spiral cavity, previously undetected, has breached the lower crust layers. No known tool caused it. Oscar rubbed the back of his neck. So it dug itself deeper? Or something beneath it activated movement? The shuttle touched down with a soft thud. A brief hiss of pressure equalization sounded. Then the hatch slid open. The artificial gravity inside the dome was slightly weaker than Earth normal. Just enough to make Oscar's injured arm feel lighter and his footsteps subtly springier. They stepped out onto the scaffold platform. The lower section of the structure had changed dramatically. The once flat floor now sloped inward like a vast inverted cone, with smooth, spiraling ridges leading down into a dim tunnel. The air smelled faintly of ozone and metal like the inside of a storm-damaged circuit board. Any seismic activity since the shift? Oscar asked. None. The transformation was instantaneous and silent. He knelt near the rim, peering down into the spiral. His arm brace made it awkward, but he managed. That's not erosion. Those curves are too clean. Enar remained standing. The material resists analysis. It is not lunar rock. It is not ours. Oscar exhaled slowly. So we're officially in. We have no idea what we're standing on territory. Yes. A group of Xelvanti technicians emerged from a side tunnel. They carried long sensor rods and floated a large, translucent orb between them. One of them paused near Oscar. You are the Earth species liaison, it said. You were the first to detect the internal stress pattern. Yeah. I'm the guy who got a broken arm for pointing at a wall. The technician's head tilted downward slightly, not quite a nod, but perhaps the closest its physiology allowed. That act delayed structural collapse. A useful injury. Oscar stood. That's one way to describe it. The technician moved on. Enar gestured toward the descending spiral. We will proceed. The council requires visual confirmation of the chamber's end. Wait, you're going down there now? Yes. The scanner drones failed to transmit beyond 60 meters. This is the suggested alternative. Suggested by whom? Me. Oscar looked down the spiral again. You're not worried about unstable footing? The structure is perfectly still. No radiation. No vibrational flux. It is simply waiting. Oscar glanced at his brace, then back at Enar. I'll go first. You are injured, which is exactly why I should. If something goes wrong, you'll want someone who knows what wrong feels like. Enar considered him for a moment. Acceptable. Oscar descended. The spiral path was smoother than he expected. Not slippery, but unnaturally even, like it had been formed by something that understood symmetry better than nature ever could. He kept one hand against the wall as he walked, the other held firmly at his side. The deeper he went, the quieter everything became, as though even sound was hesitant to follow. 50 meters in, the texture changed. The walls grew darker, less reflective. He paused, pressing his palm against the surface. It's warm, he called up. Enar's voice drifted down. Ambient temperature remains constant. I'm telling you, it's warmer here. Slightly. He continued downward. At what he estimated was 90 meters, the spiral ended. A circular platform opened into a wide chamber, completely spherical and lit by an unseen source. The floor was patterned with irregular grooves that reminded Oscar of tree rings, but they shifted subtly when he looked away, like they were syncing with his breath. Enar joined him seconds later, followed by 2 technicians. The Xelvanti paused at the chamber's edge, scanning. No energy emissions. No particulate movement. No audible frequency. Oscar walked slowly to the center. The floor was solid, but the grooves underfoot pulsed faintly with each step. He stopped. I think it's reacting to me. Enar approached. Explain. I don't know how. It just feels like it's paying attention. One of the technicians set down the orb. It hovered a few centimeters above the floor, then flickered red. Signal degradation, it said. No transmission beyond this chamber. Oscar reached into his jacket and pulled out his datapad, activating its offline visual recorder. He panned slowly across the walls, capturing the grooves, the subtle shifts in color, the lack of any visible light source. Then he paused. There was a raised platform on the far side of the chamber, just a few steps above the floor, but clearly deliberate. On it sat a single object, a hexagonal prism made of the same non-rock material, etched with a contour map that almost resembled a coastline. Oscar approached it cautiously. This wasn't here before, was it? Enar shook its head. No. Oscar reached out, hovering his fingers over the surface. It's not vibrating, not humming, just there. He touched it. The grooves on the floor vanished. The chamber didn't shake. Nothing exploded, but the air changed thicker, somehow denser. Oscar's ears popped. The light dimmed slightly, then returned. Enar stepped forward. What did you do? I touched it. An untested object. Well, I wasn't going to lick it. The prism shifted. It opened along a seam Oscar hadn't seen, revealing a hollow interior filled with what looked like threads of glass suspended in liquid. The threads moved slowly, like they were swirling toward a center. The technician scanned it. No data. Material resists spectral analysis. Oscar leaned closer. That looks like a star chart. Enar peered inside. Those are not known systems. Oscar straightened. So either someone's been here before, or this thing is trying to show us somewhere we've never seen. The prism closed again. The grooves on the floor reappeared. Enar turned to the technicians. Record all visual data. We will not remove the artifact. Oscar flexed his fingers. I didn't feel any pain when I touched it. No heat. No current. Still, we will not risk moving it. They remained in the chamber another hour, recording every visible detail. When they finally ascended, Oscar took the lead again, legs aching slightly from the constant incline. His arm throbbed in the brace, but he ignored it. Back at the surface, he sat on the edge of the scaffold platform and exhaled. Enar stood beside him. You were correct. About the structure, the transformation, the reactive design. Oscar shrugged. Lucky guess. Enar paused. The council has reviewed your actions. They no longer question your presence. Oscar raised an eyebrow. Just like that. They understand now that your unpredictability is functional, not chaotic. He chuckled. That's the nicest thing anyone's said about me in weeks. Enar looked toward the excavation tunnel. We will leave the chamber undisturbed. The artifact is not ours to claim. Oscar nodded. I agree. You do not wish to study it further? Oh, I do. But some things aren't meant to be peeled apart. Sometimes the best thing we can do is know it's there, and choose not to break it. Enar was quiet for several seconds. Then it said, You continue to perplex. Good. Keeps things interesting. They sat in silence for a while. The dust outside the dome drifted lazily and the reflected earthlight cast long shadows across the excavation site. Oscar stood stretching carefully. I'm going to request some real sleep now. The kind without observation windows. Enar inclined its head. You have earned it. As Oscar walked back toward the shuttle, the dome lights dimmed slightly, cycling into their rest phase. He didn't look back at the spiral chamber. He didn't need to. He'd felt it watching. He'd watched back. And that was enough.